Hello, everyone. In this video, we're going to talk about how to buy a house at foreclosure auction. Mike, why don't you talk about advantage of that?
Yeah, foreclosure auctions can be an incredible way to buy a house at discount prices, but they're not without their challenges.
In this video, we're going to guide you through step-by-step processes on how to buy a house at foreclosure auctions, so you can avoid some of the pitfalls and make sure you score a great deal.
Yeah, so by the end of this video, you're going to be an expert on how you could buy a house at foreclosure auction. We'll guide you through the step-by-step process of buying houses at foreclosure auctions. You're going to avoid all the pitfalls and basically score a great deal. Me and Paul, we've purchased auction properties for decades across the country, and we're going to kind of take you behind the scenes and answer any type of auction question that you guys have today. Paul, let's start off with kind of going over through the what is a foreclosure auction essentially.
Yeah, I mean, a foreclosure auction is when you're going to the courthouse, right? Property is up for sale, and there's a mortgage company that owns it, whether JP Morgan, Chase, or all those guys, and they control it, and hopefully you can buy it at a good price, good discount, but they don't always happen that way, as we well know.
Yeah. And then regarding steps to prepare for a foreclosure auction, what are some of the things you do regarding researching, talking to agents, etc.?
So you got to look at the listings online, and there's some on the newspapers and a lot of the different county websites as well. And then you got to really investigate the property. You got to do a little due diligence on these. You may have to pull title, some basic preliminary title to get some information about it, but you want to make sure location's good. So you may actually want to go out there and scout it out, check it out, see if it's vacant, see if it's occupied, see the condition of the property. And then you want to check for unpaid taxes, unpaid liens. There could be water, sewer, trash liens on a property. It could be solar panel liens, as we've run into in many properties. And make sure you do drive by to get the condition of the property and see if it is occupied or not.
Yeah, great tips there. You got to do some homework before showing up to these auctions. I mean, the other homework you want to do beforehand too is securing some financing before the auction starts. The ways we look at it from our perspective is the big three, cash, your own individual funds, and that could be just savings accounts, the self-direct IRA, HELOCs, home equity line of credits, and cash value life insurance and more. We've got plenty of videos on those topics on our channel, so feel free to look at it more. And then the other group is kind of what we call hard money lenders or asset-based lenders. These are kind of like institutions that are not part of your traditional banking, where they'll look at more of the deal and less like you as the creditor. Fees could be a little bit more, but it's kind of a good way to have a second look over your shoulder with some of these. They might charge anywhere from 0 to 3 points and interest from 9 to 15% interest, depending on the bridge loan. And then lastly, as you gain some traction, it's great to have private lenders in your stable of funding. These are just individuals instead of like institutions lending on the deal. Just someone looking to kind of diversify their portfolio instead of just being all in stocks. Let me, invest in some short-term real estate essentially as a lender. So those are kind of the secure your financing before the auction that I wanted to cover. Next, I want to talk about, what actually happens at the auction process, like the day of. And I figured best to show two different counties that are randomly selected in Pennsylvania. One's an in-person, one's does them on online auctions. So I'm going to share my screen now, Paul, and kind of walk people through some of this stuff.
Yeah, and you and I were at one in Bucks County years ago.
Yep. Paul, you see my screen here? Making sure. Yeah. So this is Bucks County. It's, if you watch the election, it's one of the counties they talk about, just north of Philadelphia there. And they are in person, right? They have their mortgage default sales through the sheriff's sale the second Friday of each month at 11 a.m. And, what do you need? You got to bring some ID basically when you get there. And it's basically a simple form that you fill out. It's just what's your name, phone number, email, etc., and an ID. Pretty basic. And then they're talking about a bunch of other things here where you got to bring a $2,500 deposit that day. There's some legalese stuff basically saying that properties could, someone could, make the mortgage whole before the sale. So it might be off the list. And then, the big one here is you got to do some research up front on this stuff. You have to make sure there's no other debt liens that you're inheriting on the property, because the largest lien is most likely being foreclosed on, which is the first position mortgage. But you could have second positions, you could have solar panel liens that we've seen recently more in the past, and other things out there. So you want to be aware of like what you're buying. And they also provide listings And some key terminology here, right? Debt amount is basically the amount owed to the plaintiff. All costs, upset price, postponed stay, sold through third party. Not going to read them all here, but these are essentially and examples of county's sheriff sale. Now, here's an example of some listings. It's a separate page that you go to, and they kind of give you more information, and you click on one of these links here, and this essentially here. Oh, I show blank. Let's bring it up again. Is an example of certain listings on an April 25th sale here, and these terms here were defined on the previous page, so you can kind of go into it here. But here's an example of different types of sheriff sale properties, and for this county, what they display to people essentially, and what they're essentially looking to get. And this is a list that you would go off of and start doing your due diligence. In this case, it's a PDF. So, print it out and kind of mark it up like, hey, I'm interested in this one. And right next to it, like a max bid amount, things like that. Another one I'm going to give an example of is Philadelphia County. They actually do their mortgage sales online, and they use a company called Bid for Assets. So essentially, kind of looks like here, you kind of go to the site, and then you would click here for tax sales or mortgage foreclosure sales. In this case, we're interested in mortgage foreclosure sales, and here's a list of all the properties electronic. So a little bit of better user experience, in my opinion, being online today. But that's kind of some of the things that the differences between different types of counties out there.
And the whole state of Florida, Mike, does that as well.
Yeah, and it varies throughout the country. As you know, a smaller rural or county might not have the technology to do this, so it's still in person. They might not have the volume to do it either, so that's why they keep it on paper or in person still. And then Philly does a good job of a million different FAQs here. For them, I think Bucks County was $2,500. You got to do a $10,000 deposit on foreclosure sales, whereas tax sales is only $1,500. So before, Paul talked about the due diligence early on in the individual properties. Do some due diligence on your actual foreclosure sale process. That way you're well informed before going into it, knowing what you need, how much money, things like that.
Good to do private Edler, right? If you go there and just take a look at the process, don't even think about bidding, right? Just go one time, look at it, see how the process goes. You're more familiar with it.
That's a great point. Just go there, learn to lay all the land, see how they bid, who bids. That way it's practice essentially, right? You know now when you're ready to play the game, you've seen it, the game, how it unfolds, you practiced it. That's a great tip actually, Paul. So what happens, I guess, after the auction closing on the deal? And usually, if you win, you're going to have to complete some additional steps, such as paying the remaining balances, and they could be due within 10 days, 30 days. Again, it varies by tax sale. You got to work with a title company to make sure there's no other outstanding liens that we talked about earlier. Going through the sheriff's sale doesn't wipe out everything else. And then, transfer of ownership through the title process goes to you as well. So those are things to be aware of. And there's going to be additional cost with any traditional closing, like title insurance, property taxes, etc. So anything there to add, Paul, on the closing the deal from a foreclosure auction?
Yeah, and one thing to be it's kind of an important thing to think about because different counties are different states are different. If you're in a right of redemption state like Alabama, there's a potential 6 months later it could come back. So some investors in the past have bought the property, sat on it for 6 months and not rehabbed it. But I know there's been new laws written where if somebody does rehab it, they're protected. The buyers come back, but they have to pay back that person that rehabbed the property. It's just another thing to think about, right? Most places you don't have the right of redemption, but it's just take a look and do your due diligence on where you live or where you're bidding.
Yeah. And then let's talk about some of the risk and rewards at buying at a foreclosure auction. Paul, I'll do the rewards. We'll make you play bad copy because you're right about the risk on this video. And rewards, the way I see it is you have the great potential to buying a property below market value because it's a moat. Not everyone knows of the auction process. You're not buying it from the MLS or an agent or competitive. And the other thing I like too is like you don't have to go direct to seller always either. Like so you're not sending postcards and doing all this marketing lead generation. You just kind of show up like we showed earlier and look at the list. And then it's a quick way to just get home ownership for an investment property or your own personal property. They have these every 30 days and the list constantly changes. So those are some of the rewards that I see. Paul, what are some of the risks?
So some of the risks are limited property access for inspections. It may be occupied. You may not be able to get in there. Hidden costs of unpaid taxes and liens are another big one. We talked about that. Solar panel liens. There could be all kinds of different liens on these properties, and tight payment deadlines. You need to have a lot of money, at least 10% up front, and then within 10 days to 30 days for the rest for closing. And then the last one would probably be the right of redemption areas, right, where people could come back and get it again.
Yeah. So to wrap up, buying a house at foreclosure auction could be a smart move if you do your homework. If you're ready to give it a shot, let me know your thoughts or questions in the comments below. If you got some value out of this video, please share with one of your friends and smash a like button. And I got a free gift for you for watching today. If you go to the bottom of the show notes, we have a link there on our 7-step process on how to buy property through an online auction. So check that out. Get a lot of great value there.